So I decided on the spur of the moment to spend Christmas Day and the day after at Yosemite. So you can probably see my breath. It's a little chilly. There was snow, but at the upper elevations, it was a beautiful day. I just wanted to record a few thoughts on some words that for me have been redefining themselves, clarifying their meaning. And the question I have is for you is, how many words do you use in your daily speech that you really haven't deeply connected with the meaning of? How many words are you using that are just sort of habitual reactions or patterns that you learned from somewhere, but you haven't really internalized meaning of those words for yourself and how they actually resonate with feeling for you? So 4 of these words for me are choice, responsibility, power, and healing. So I'll just take them one at a time. Choice, as I alluded to in another video, has for me mostly been about being chosen. So the quote-unquote choices that I was making my whole life, and I made plenty of them, were at a deeper level more about making myself choosable. So they were choices in order to, or conditional or codependent choices, either in order to make someone feel a certain way about me, or to prevent someone from doing something that I didn't like, or to be approved of. And it wasn't like conscious manipulation, but it was just very conditioned choice. And so now I'm really beginning to connect with the power of I choose, coming from not the ego I, or the I that wants to be chosen, but the I am place of I am the one who chooses. So that's a subtle distinction, but for me is very real in terms of owning the power to choose. So that kind of goes to my next word, which I'll switch the order and go to power first and then responsibility. So power, if I think about what that has meant to me, it's been like the people in power over there or up there, the powers that be, people's power over me, the authorities' power, who has the power, or the power game, all of which have sort of this connotation of, ugh, for me, about, something that people are grasping for, there's never enough, and the people who have it usually become a little bit gross. I mean, usually they use it in a way that's not very, that's usually self-serving versus truly honoring the people below them. So I had a very hierarchical meaning for power. And now I'm seeing that true power comes again from the I am place, when we're truly feeling our own world from which we see the world. So the place behind our eyes, the consciousness in our heart, the awareness of our creative source and power, it's a different kind of power. It's something that no one can give to us and no one can take away. But we have to own it. It can be hidden from us. Much like I was talking about with desire, it's like we can be completely alienated from our own power and be looking for it so many other places to no avail, because they're all sort of false substitutes for the substance we really want to experience, which is that deep wellspring infinity within us. And so that's what I'm learning to define as power. And it's a good segue into responsibility, which again, when I think about my old definitions of responsibility, it was always kind of a heavy word and kind of a big, big thing. Like, I'm responsible for fill in the blank. Usually it was everyone else's experience, because I tended to gravitate toward positions of responsibility, quote unquote leadership, which is another word that I won't define tonight, but roles that included a lot of responsibility for things getting done or things operating a certain way, people performing, an organization, meeting goals, etc. So it always felt like, oh, I got to get my game face on, I got to perform, I got to get, people working, got to work really hard, I got to be the most organized, I got to be on top of everything, I have to make everything perfect, I have to make it right. So it was very stressful to take on responsibility, and yet that was my MO, because I'm a responsible person and I was born to take on all this responsibility, and this is what people look to me for, and I defined that for myself, and I created situations that fulfilled that. And yet now what I see is a new possibility for responsibility, or the ability to respond, create a response in a situation that's in alignment with the power within each person and then the power of the collective. So it relates a lot to power as I was talking about it, but this is a freeing sensation for me when I think of that responsibility, because again, instead of trying to control everyone else and contain the energy of everyone else, which is just always going everywhere and totally unpredictable, and so that's why it's so stressful to try to see yourself in the role of having to contain that. It's like, oh my gosh, a single person fighting a forest fire. This new definition of responsibility comes from within. The same source of power that I was just speaking about is the source of your ability to respond, your ability to take on responsibility, and the definition of what it is that you as an individual can do in any situation. So you can define the role as your ability to respond creatively from your own source of power in that moment, seeing the whole situation, taking it all in, seeing all the players, recognizing that none of them can be controlled, and they each have to be freed to find their own source of power. And that's the fun challenge of leadership and responsibility now, is for me, is how do I walk in and show up and set, by who I am in my presence, set an atmosphere that truly frees and ignites each person in that space to own their own power. Because I know that when people own their power, as I defined it just now, not the hierarchical kind, but their true inner source of creative power and the I am power of infinity, that if everyone is showing up in a space like that, it's magic, it's music, it's a symphony, it's like amazing jazz, whatever, choose your genre, but it's music. And so that's what I'm learning about those words. And finally, healing, which this, I woke up to maybe 10 years after graduating from medical school and having a whole lifetime of sort of the scientific model of medical cure and treatment, surgery, etc., that I had no idea what healing is. I had no picture of healing. I had pictures of sick people getting better, maybe, hopefully, things being administered to target problems, things being studied in order to eradicate things, but never a model of what does healing look like? What does it look like? What did it look like before we had science? Just out of curiosity, because science, this model of medicine is pretty new in human history. So, what did the ancient cultures consider healing? And it wasn't like I set out to study that, but I discovered it through this experience called sound healing. And I sort of equated medicine and healing at the time because wound healing, we learned about that as a physiological process, how the body deals with a injured tissue. But I did not have a picture of what it felt like to witness healing or to experience it. Not just the thank God you got it, you gave me the antibiotic and I don't have my infection anymore, which is very significant. Antibiotics are great. Or, so glad you got the whole tumor and, clean margins and all that. That's how we've been trained to define the relief of, oh, they got it. It's like the cowboys western film, like they got the bad guys, they took down the villain, and they're in jail now. We can all sleep at night. And this other definition of healing is more subtle because it doesn't depend on certain material circumstances or physical circumstances in order to occur. It can occur in the presence or absence of the illness, disease, or lesion. So healing is independent of a physical phenomenon. It actually happens at the level of consciousness. And it actually, I can best describe it as the outcome of meeting someone's affliction, whatever, problem, experience with outrageous love. So what happens when we love and touch and breathe and feel something and allow it to transform, that is healing. So the transformation aspect, which is the spontaneous outcome of meeting that place in someone, the feeling of discomfort, disease, the pain, the fear, the grief, the whatever, the emotion being stirred in the body and being expressed in the body, when we meet it with a certain consciousness and we nurture and feed a vision of its transformation and then allow it to transform, that is healing. So, if you notice, you can have a physical ailment that is, quote, cured medically and have an absence of healing with no transformation of consciousness. And conversely, you can have healing or transformation of consciousness in the absence of physical cure of the, quote, pathology as defined medically. And this is, been described by all of the medically trained physicians that have crossed over into kind of Eastern spirituality and integrated that into their practices have described this, where they have cancer patients that go through all of the radiation and surgery, etc., but they additionally do certain healing modalities like for the transformation of consciousness, and they can end up dying with their disease but be healed. Meaning, at their deathbed, they express gratitude for the disease showing up in their lives in order that they may see themselves and their world through new eyes. so that the disease was their vehicle, their path, their carrier to a new place of consciousness, greater love, whatever it is. Usually it's greater love. And we can also have people that go through repeated medical corrections and treatments and experience no transformation in consciousness and have no idea why all these things happened to them or what it was all for, and they just feel very lucky. So obviously I'm interested in healing, transformation, creativity, and the intersection of all these fields. And one of the really key aspects for me is to unpack the words that we throw around so casually that we just roll off our tongues on a daily basis without being really aware of what they mean, what we're making them mean. And when we can see what we're making them mean and allow them to take on a meaning that gives us a deeper connection to the place in our consciousness we want to touch, we are healing through our own language. So, from Curry Village at Yosemite, it's time to get under the covers because it's cold.